Homage to the Buddha, homage to the Dharma, homage to the Sangha. Once again, good evening. I want to speak tonight on one aspect of our liturgy, and that's the commemoration of the Buddha's death. So it's a ceremony called Nehan, and Nehan usually takes place in early to mid-February. Dharma Rain just had their Nehan service on February 2nd. And so for us, an exact date is not necessary. We're not looking for an exact death date for the Buddha. But I do think it's important to remember the Buddha's death and the teachings that he gave during that time and the ways that we commemorate his life and his teaching. And so a simple version of the Buddha's death goes like this. The Buddha became ill and predicted his own death in 3 months' time. And Ananda at that point missed a key opportunity to ask the Buddha not to die and didn't realize it until it was too late. So after those 3 months had passed, the Buddha was offered a meal that he ate and then asked that the leftovers be buried. He didn't let anybody else eat from that bowl. He then became quite ill with dysentery. And after asking that his monks be called together, he lay down between 2 sala trees, which bloomed out of season. And in addition to his monks and devas and other invisible spirits were all there gathered to say their farewells. And then the Buddha died. He passed away. And the sutras say that during his time of dying, he continued to give teachings and even ordained monastics into the Sangha. And so imagine here is a man who had been teaching for 40 years. He was elderly. And he died of tainted food, unintentionally tainted food, but he died of dysentery, which is a rather painful condition and a rather messy condition, and one in which if it was us, we would like to stay behind closed doors. And he let this be a public death. He let it be a teaching. And he continued to teach. And his disciples, his followers, were upset about this. They were grieving. But all conditioned things pass away, even a body, even a Buddha. And so we commemorate this with an annual ceremony. And I'm sort of going through this backwards. So if it seems like I'm going through this backwards, it's deliberate. At the end of that ceremony, there's an offertory. And the offertory sounds like this. It reads, "The Dharma body of the Buddha cannot be seen so long as one is within duality, for it is beyond birth and death, filling all things. Out of compassion for all living things, the Buddha appeared in the form and figure of a human being. For this great act, we bow in gratitude and pray that we may be able to eliminate our minds from delusion. On this, whatever day in February, we've gathered to commemorate our Lord Shakyamuni's entry into parinirvana. And we offer incense, flowers, candles, cakes, tea, and fruit, the merits of the recitation of the Litany of the Great Compassionate One, the adoration of the Buddha's relics, and the Heart of Great Perfect Wisdom Sutra out of gratitude for his great compassion. The moon over Mount Ryoju shines miraculously in all directions. The sala trees bloom and their petals convey the fragrance of the Dharma down to the present time. The Buddha transcended desire and used the blessing of his understanding to help all who are deluded. After all delusion is removed, that which remains is called the true form, the form of Buddha, all. The merit of this form has been a light for all from the far past until the present time. All forms of existence join in the grief of this day and wholeheartedly recite with us this scripture. We are filled with awe at the countless voices and boundless light which proclaim the Dharma. We vow to propagate it eternally. What a beautiful dedication. What a beautiful remembrance. Out of compassion for all living things, the Buddha appeared in the form and figure of a human being. For this great act, we bow in gratitude and pray that we may be able to illuminate our minds from delusion. This is the core hope of Buddhism, that we may be able to free ourselves from delusion, from ignorance, from craving, from our beliefs in things as permanent, constant, unchanging. In this dedication, it speaks of many things that we offer: incense, flowers, candles, fruit, tea, cakes, all of these things that are offered to one who is deserving of respect. And several scriptures are recited in this ceremony. The Litany of the Great Compassionate One, which is a sung service. The Adoration of the Buddha's Relics, which is also a sung service. Both of these come to us through Jyoshin. She was the one that put these scriptures to music. And then the Heart of Great Perfect Wisdom Sutra, which is something that is probably the most commonly chanted scripture in Zen. And the dedication speaks of the place, the setting of the Buddha's death. The moon over Mount Ryoju, which is Vulture Peak, shines miraculously. The salad trees bloom and their petals convey the fragrance of the Dharma. And it said these salad trees, these flowering trees, flowered out of season in their grief over the death of the Buddha. So a miracle, something unusual, something remarkable. During the ceremony itself, the way this ceremony is held, the Litany of the Great Compassionate One is sung. The Adoration of the Buddha's Relics is sung. And at the end of the Adoration of the Buddha's Relics, the doshi, the celebrant, the teacher who's on the haishiki, approaches the altar and puts out all of the candles on the altar. The meditation candle, the service candle. If there's an eternal light on the altar, that candle is even extinguished. That light is usually never turned off, but even that light is extinguished. All the lights in the hall get turned off. And in theory, when the ceremony is done right, these lights go down and the adoration ends, and there's a moment of silence. Everything is dark. And then the newer Sangha member approaches the altar and relights the candles from candle that had been hidden away. So the altar is lit again, and the lights on the room get turned back on. The lights come up again. And after that, as the Heart Sutra is recited, there's a procession by everyone in the hall. Everybody gets an opportunity to step in front of the altar and offer incense and join in a procession reciting Heart Sutra. And then after that, the priest center intones this dedication that I just read, and the ceremony concludes. And it's this part that I really want to bring forward tonight for the talk, this aspect of the symbolism of putting out the candles and then relighting them. So we put out the candles, symbolizing the death of the Buddha. The world goes dark. In our grief, that is how it appears. In our grief with our teacher gone, our loved one gone, our respected one gone. The world appears dark. How could we possibly go on? How could we possibly step forward? So there's this moment of silence. There's this moment of stillness in the midst of this hall that had just been singing grief. And then a newer Sangha member comes in and relights those candles. And it's said that one of the Buddha's last teachings was something to the effect of be a lamp unto yourself. That's a very sort of pithy, shortened version of one of his last teachings. And there is this aspect of remembering that that light of the Dharma continues, and that is something that we carry forward. We can say it is something that has been carried forward from the Buddha's time until our time when we think of lineage, when we think of our bloodline. But there's also this aspect of we carry this light forward. Once we have received the teaching, it is us that carry that light. It is each of us that carry that light. Just as you can say, as a light gets passed from a candle to a candle, is that flame the same or different? Is the Dharma as we know it the same or different? Surely language has changed, ideas have changed. But what is it that is unspoken, that is not dependent on words or language, that is still transmitted down through the generations, through the ages? What is it that we continue to carry and embody? This sense of continuity is important. In Buddhism as a whole, time tends to have oftentimes it's said a circular time, not linear time, but it's almost as if it's a spiral. It comes around again and again. It is said that Maitreya will be the next Buddha. He's up in Tushita heaven waiting. But it is also said that the next Buddha won't arrive until Buddhism dies out in our current age. So there is a sense of both arising, abiding, falling, and there is a sense of even when it seems like Buddhism disappears, it's not the end. That's one thing I hold on to as I look at all of the changes that are happening now in terms of society and politics, the upheavals, the fact that each day seems vastly different than the day before, and yet time has a strange meaning. Buddhism continues. Something continues. We continue. And even when it seems like all the lights have been put out, when it seems like there's no hope and we're wrapped in grief, that light is still there. It is hidden until someone new can relight the altar, until someone new brings it forward, gives it a voice, lets it be seen. And that, we don't talk about hope a lot in Buddhism. I work with a whole pile of Christian pastors or people who have been pastors, and hope is a very big part of that tradition. We don't talk about it so much, but it's this aspect of how we step forward from the Buddha's parinirvana that for me speaks of hope. That aspect of when it seems like all is dark, there is that sense that the light is still there, even if we can't see it, and it will be brought back. And it is up to us to bring it back. to embody that Dharma, to pay attention to what is important. To embrace non-harming, to embrace kindness, to embrace compassion in a way that speaks to both thriving and continuing to work to rid ourselves of delusion, of our hindrances, of all of these things that our small self says must be true. Our small self says lots of things. But what is true? That's a question that we can keep coming back to again and again. So we don't have the capacity to engage this ceremony, which I love ceremony as a teaching tool. I love the symbolism of it, the story that gets told in body and chant and position and symbolic item. But I wanted you to know about this ceremony. I wanted you to know about some of our traditions. And Nehan is definitely one of our traditions. Oftentimes on the altar, there is a statue of the Buddha laying down on his right side and surrounded by all of these creatures of the forest and the jungle. And it represents that moment of his dying with everyone gathered around him. So a few thoughts on Nehan, a few thoughts of Buddha's death, how we commemorate it, a few thoughts of collective sorrow. But that's what I've got for you all to think about and chew on for tonight. Questions and comments are welcome.
Thank you, Jyoshin. I love that ritual, and your description of it is lovely. It's a bummer that we have to wait for Buddhism to die completely for the next Buddha to happen. What's up with that? I mean, that can't be right.
Well, keep in mind, there's many, many, many different teachings in Buddhism. There is one that says that Buddhism will die out before the next Buddha comes. But we also have Maitreya up in Tushita heaven. We already know who's coming next. And I'm not going to say anything.
Why not? Why not?
Cliffhanger.
Because I was going to say, in my mind, I don't know what's going to happen. Maitreya comes traipsing down the street. I don't know.
That's the trouble with Zen. I mean, the Tibetans seem to have a lot more solid handle on everything.
Well, they have a different way of looking at things.
Yeah.
It's all just different perspectives. And like, I'm a person that loves questions more than answers. So I like to leave that aspect of like, does Buddhism really need to die out before the next Buddha comes? Like, I'll let that be a question.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna grab onto a hard and fast rule.
Well, I don't expect anybody could know. But my Dharma name, Teiko, means faithful illumination. And the way I picture that is just like kind of this Shetland pony dragging coal through the through the coal mines. I mean, not in a terrible way. I love Shetland ponies, but I think of that verse that just to do this continuously is called the host within the host. So I think that there's some illumination, that just survives.
Yeah. Yeah. And in our meal verses, we recount the 7 Buddhas of the past. So we know there's more out there.
Yeah, thank you for that. The 7 Buddhas of the past is really great to think about.
And in scriptures and sutras, Buddha tells stories of when he was a bodhisattva and met Dipankara Buddha, who was the Buddha before him. And I don't have a sense of like a broken line. I have a sense of continuity. But that's me. That's how my faith in Buddhism manifests.
Thank you, Jyoshin, for this succinct, beautiful delivery tonight. It's good to hear, for me, the reminders of the symbolism. And I think in this life I'm living now, if there's Buddha nature, I'm in beings, I'm not going to worry about, I know that implies the continuity to me. And to me, the shape, the dynamic of a spiral feeds back on itself. So that's energy that I believe I can count on being there, whether I'm still in this body or not anymore. So I find that simply comforting, but I don't have to explain it to anybody or even to myself.
Yeah. Thank you, Ruth Ann.
Yeah, Ruth Ann, I really like what you said because I was thinking, I don't really know that much about what we talked about tonight because I haven't studied it. But I think, like you said, it's like if we carry that light and Buddha is Buddha nature, then maybe we don't need a Buddha on earth with it all the time. Maybe we carry that, and then when the timing's right, for whatever reason that I should don't know when the timing's right or why, I don't know why. Why do we have to wait? So I don't know, but I'm not sure anybody does. But maybe it's all in what does that mean that Buddhism's going to die? But if we keep it alive and we spread that compassion and that caring, then there's a lifeline until the next Buddha comes to planet Earth. I don't know. It's very interesting to think about, but I like what you said with them. We can carry the Buddha nature.
Teiko, hold on, Dio. Teiko, will you make a note for me just to do a talk at some point on the 3 bodies of Buddha? I think that might be a good topic for this group. Thanks. Okay, Dio, what was your...
Well, I want to thank you for your description of the ceremony. I think it's the first time that you've described that I know anything about a Buddhist ceremony that really spoke to me, and it spoke very deeply.
Mhm. Thank you.
Perhaps it's dealing with death, which I'm still kind of dealing with on the edges, but
Mhm.
it was the fact of darkness and then the light again.
Mhm. I was wondering if ceremony might resonate with you, given your history with acting, that
Yeah,
putting the
well,
body through something.
yeah, for something, and some ceremonies resonate with me and some don't, but your description really did resonate. So thank you.
Thank you. I'm hoping to do that with more of our ceremonies as we go through our years, just touch on some of those aspects.
Hi.
Somebody else.
Is my mic on? Can I be heard?
Yeah, you're kind of quiet.
Okay. I'll talk loud. um, I find the story of like Buddhism completely dying out and then Maitreya showing up to be just like profoundly comforting in the sense of like this religion or like a realizing of the nature of suffering is a naturally occurring thing. Like it happened. And so like every trace of it can be destroyed and it will naturally occur again. And like I think about that with a lot of things, and like I promise to not go too deep on this, but like being transgender right now is a bit scary, and like a good portion of people want transgenderness to not exist anymore. And I just like I find that comforting that like every trace can be eradicated, and also like it's just a naturally occurring thing. So I draw a parallel there. And like I was thinking about it before this Dharma talk. I think like it really calms me down, like Maitreya coming after Buddhism has declined.
When we think about the Buddha's enlightenment, we often talk about sort of that amazing awakening that he had. But like for that to be amazing, it had to be new, new, new to the culture at hand. And that aspect of it being naturally arising, something that I remember when I was talking this over with Kyogen, there was that sense of Buddhism will spring forward. It might not be called Buddhism. It might not be, who knows what the words or the trappings are, but that aspect of awakening will spring forward again. So Buddhism will come again and transness will come again. But hopefully it won't disappear.
Yeah. I just like, everything will disappear. And so like there's this to solace in it. I don't know.
Yeah. We
But
don't
yeah,
have to hold
hopefully,
on.
hopefully not.
Yeah. We don't have to hold on so tightly.
Right.
Yeah.
So is it kind of like death and rebirth then? I mean, I find this subject fascinating. In fact, I've been thinking for a while. I was gonna, I don't know, send this out to you, Jyoshin, but I would love to have you talk about death. But I really don't know how Buddhism and death relate, except for what we talked about tonight. So I think that'd be really interesting. And I was fascinated that from the Buddha's the ceremony, that even though it was the wrong time of year, flowers bloomed to signify, I think I got this right, what you said,
Mhm.
signify the sorrow, but flowers to me are cheery and bright, so why wouldn't it signify the life that he led and that he's it's a transition. It's not a sad transition, a happy transition. So why is it sorrow? Why is it a happiness?
Mhm.
That was
Mhm.
what was going through my little brain.
Yeah, yeah. Let's say the flowers bloomed out of season to mark the event and give it a neutral spin
Like that.
to signify something remarkable was happening.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Teiko, will you add to my list not only death, but Buddhist cosmology?
Mhm.
Got about 10 more minutes. If there's more comments or discussion to be had, questions.
I mean, I think Takeoff said this, and I think that it was answered, but I guess I want to pursue it just in case there's something more. But why? Why does the Buddha not come back for a long time? Is it? I mean, is there a reason? I mean, my mind goes to what's currently going on in the world, but I don't really know. So what? Why is there this gap?
Well, it's not. So this gets into that sense of the three bodies of Buddha.
Okay.
So there's the physical body, the rupa body that dies the way we all die. And then there's that's the Nirmanakaya. There's the Sambhogakaya, the enjoyment body, which is the like the cosmic aspect of Buddha. And then there's the Dharmakaya, which is that vast teaching aspect. And so it's the Dharmakaya that is said will die out before the next Buddha comes. So that aspect of Buddhism in the world attenuates to the point where it's no longer seen before it springs up again. Does that make sense? Okay. Okay.
Pretty good job. I couldn't process it.
I'll save it for a talk on the three bodies of Buddha.
Okay. Thank
Yeah.
you. I got the general idea, but yeah.
Yeah. The other thing that stands out for me in this teaching of his death is just that in spite of his discomfort, he continued to teach. In spite of his illness, in spite of his physical distress, he still continued to teach. He still continued to meet with his monks. He still continued to ordain. And you can look in the Parinirvana Sutra or the Parinibbana Sutra, which I don't think are exactly the same text. And it describes his death, and it describes the teachings that he gives at the time of his death. And like their core Buddhist teachings about the self, about emptiness, about ways to not get trapped in delusion. So he's in this physical distress and still willing to teach, still willing to help people. And that I find remarkable, because when I get sick, I get the flu, I turn into a big baby. I don't want to talk to anybody. I just want to hide under the covers with my Gatorade and moan and woe is me, this is terrible. So like that capacity to continue even when he's sick, and that capacity, like, that shows care. That shows how much his teaching is important to him. And it's beautiful.
Yeah, and how much he could rise above his bodily needs, which I find really fascinating.
Yeah.
Rise above the pain in his body,
Mhm.
totally rise about that, where it wasn't dominating his behavior or his thoughts.
No, but he did attend to it. He did stop and rest and lay down. His disciples made him a bower underneath those salad trees. And so it also wasn't as if he was completely cut off from his physicality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it didn't dominate him.
Mhm. Mhm.
I could understand how Buddhism as an institution could be born, grow old, and die like everything else, because aging and decay and inevitable corruption, and that's just the way of the world. So I really guess I get that, and I love the idea that the institution can die, but the Dharma, is what it is.
There is aspects in the tradition that speak of the decline of the Dharma. And at the time, I think it was divided up in like 500-year chunks. I'd have to go back and look at it. But one of the key events that is said to bring about the decline of the Dharma was the ordination of women. I have opinions on that.
They said a lot of things.
But
I mean,
the Buddha did ordain women. And he had to be like, that's a whole nother Dharma talk.
that's a whole nother.
That's a whole nother Dharma talk. I think for a certain set of Buddhist thinkers, like trying to map out how all of this is going to happen was very important to them.
Yeah.
When and where and how, and like, I'm not concerned about that. I'm not concerned about that.
Just pull the arrow out, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Good for now. The universe is as the boundless sky, just as the lotus is not withered by the water that surrounds it. The mind is immaculate and beyond the dust. Let us bow to the highest Lord. All Buddhas throughout space and time, all honored ones, bodhisattvas, mahasattvas, wisdom beyond wisdom, maha prajna paramita. Thank you all.
Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Oh,
Jyoshin.
It's wonderful.
yes.
Have a good night,
Safe
everyone.